The thing about being a paramedic is you learn to spot when things are about to go very wrong before anyone else notices. The shallow breathing, the glassy stare, that peculiar stillness that settles over something that's about to quit fighting. 12 years running emergency calls in Boston, and I've developed what my partner Reggie calls my instinct radar. What I didn't expect was for it to start beeping every time I looked at my wife. My name's Caleb Norton. I'm 42 years old, and I should have seen the signs earlier. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Lana Pierce, she kept her maiden name for professional reasons, had been acting like a patient in cardiac arrest for months. Distant, cold, going through the motions of being alive while something vital inside her had already flatlined. The woman who used to greet me at the door with coffee and complaints about her latest photography assignment now barely looked up from her laptop when I walked in. "How was your shift?" she'd ask without lifting her eyes from the screen, her voice carrying all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "Saved 3 lives, lost one to a heart attack on Beacon Street," I'd reply, testing her. "Mm-hmm. That's nice, honey." Nice, like I'd told her about finding a decent parking spot. The real kicker came on a Tuesday night in October. I'd just finished a double shift, 18 hours of screaming, and one particularly memorable call involving a guy who'd tried to deep fry a turkey in his living room. I walked into our Somerville apartment expecting the usual cold shoulder, but instead found Lana pacing the kitchen in a black dress I'd never seen before. "I'm going out," she announced, not meeting my eyes. "Where?" "Art opening, downtown. You wouldn't be interested." She was right about that. Lana's art crowd made root canal surgery look entertaining, but what caught my attention wasn't the destination, it was the dress. Tight, expensive looking, and definitely not something you wore to network with other struggling photographers. "Who's the photographer?" I asked, settling into my chair with a beer. "Miles Trent. You don't know him." But I did know him. Miles Trent was Lana's ex-boyfriend from art school, the guy she'd dated for 3 years before we met. The same Miles Trent she'd sworn was completely out of her life when we got married 5 years ago. "Have fun," I said, taking a long pull from my beer. "Try not to let Miles buy you too many drinks." The look she shot me could have stopped a charging bull. "It's not like that, Caleb. This is business, professional networking." "Sure it is." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving me alone with my beer and the growing certainty that my marriage was circling the drain like everything else I'd failed to save that day. The professional networking became a weekly thing, then twice a week, always with Miles, always requiring the kind of outfits that had nothing to do with taking pictures and everything to do with being one. I started paying attention to details the way I did at work. The new lingerie that appeared in our laundry, black lace numbers that definitely weren't for my benefit, considering we hadn't had closeness in 2 months. The way she'd started showering immediately after coming home from her meetings. The phone calls she'd take in the bathroom with the water running. She's finally having some fun again, you know? Cass, Lana's best friend, let slip one afternoon when she stopped by to pick up some photography equipment. I mean, after being stuck in routine for so long. Stuck in routine? Cass's face went red. I just meant, marriage can be boring sometimes. Everyone needs a little excitement. Excitement. Right. The final nail in the coffin came from Mrs. Geller, our 70-year-old neighbor who spent most of her time monitoring the building's comings and goings from her front window. "That tall man was here again last night," she mentioned casually as I collected our mail. "Left around midnight. Handsome fellow, but he's got sneaky eyes. You know the type." I knew the type. I also knew that I'd been working a night shift when this mysterious tall man was keeping my wife company until midnight. That evening, I confronted Lana directly. She was editing photos on her laptop, the same laptop that was synced to her phone and backed up to our shared cloud account, a detail she'd apparently forgotten. "So how long has Miles been coming over when I'm at work?" Her fingers froze over the keyboard. "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Geller mentioned seeing him. Tall guy, sneaky eyes, sounds like your type. Mrs. Geller is a crazy old woman who's been right about everything else in this building for the past 3 years. I sat down across from her, using the same calm voice I used with panicked patients. "Just tell me the truth, Lana. Are you sleeping with him?" The silence stretched between us like a flat line on a heart monitor. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold enough to preserve organs. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Miles. Yes, we're sleeping together, and yes, it's better than anything I've had with you in years." There it was, the final rattle I'd been waiting for. "How long?" 3 months, since September. Why? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Why? Because you're boring, Caleb. Because coming home to you is like coming home to a morgue. Because Miles makes me feel alive in ways you never could. I nodded slowly, processing the information like I would any other medical emergency. Patient presents with multiple symptoms of betrayal. Prognosis, terminal. Okay, I said. Okay? She looked confused, like she'd been expecting tears or shouting. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? You've made your choice. Now I'll make mine. I stood up and headed for the bedroom, leaving her staring after me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe. Or disappointment that I hadn't given her the dramatic scene she was looking for. In the bedroom, I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app. Joint checking account. 12,237. Savings, 23,156. All of it money I'd earned working double shifts while she pursued her art career that had yet to generate a dime of income. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Lana. I need $5,000 immediately. Art equipment emergency. If you say no, we're done. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, ask your ex. Then I did something that would have made my old paramedic instructor proud. I called the police. Detective Ray Morales had the kind of face that had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. He sat across from me in the police station's interview room, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on a Thursday morning. So, let me get this straight, he said, flipping through his notepad. Your wife is having an affair with her ex-boyfriend, and you think they're running some kind of scam? I know they are. I slid my phone across the table. Check the cloud backup from her laptop. She forgot we share the same account. Morales squinted at the screen, scrolling through the messages I'd screenshot the night before. His expression shifted from bored to interested to downright fascinated. Save the Arts Foundation, he read aloud. Seed money from husband's account will legitimize the charity. Once we're established, donations pour in. Split everything 60-40. He looked up at me. This is from yesterday? 2 days ago. There's more. He kept scrolling. The messages painted a clear picture. Lana and Miles had been planning their charity scam for weeks. They'd already filed paperwork for a nonprofit, created a website, and scheduled a fundraising event at a downtown gallery. All they needed was my money to make it look legitimate. Caleb's such an idiot, Morales continued reading. Mr. Emergency Exit thinks he's saving the world one junkie at a time. This'll be easier than stealing candy from a corpse. That one stung, not because it was cruel, but because it was so perfectly Lana, taking something I was proud of and twisting it into an insult. There's also this, I said, showing him another conversation thread. This one was between Lana and Cass. Does he suspect anything? No, he's too busy playing hero to notice his wife is getting actual excitement for once. Miles makes me feel like a woman instead of a roommate. Plus, when this charity thing pays off, I'll have enough money to disappear completely. Morales whistled low. Your wife's got a mouth on her. Had. Past tense. You file for divorce yet? Paperwork's being processed today. I've also frozen our joint accounts and moved my direct deposit to a personal account she can't access. Smart. What about the apartment? Lease is in my name. Changed the locks this morning while she was at her studio. I made air quotes around the word. Which, by the way, I've been paying for. Turns out she's been using it more for entertaining Miles than for photography. Morales leaned back in his chair. You're pretty calm for a guy whose world just imploded. I've seen enough real emergencies to know the difference between a crisis and a cleanup job. This is just cleanup. My phone started buzzing. Lana's name flashed on the screen, along with a photo from our honeymoon in Cape Cod. She looked happy in that picture. Genuine. It was hard to believe that woman and the one running charity scams with her ex were the same person. Aren't you going to answer that? No point. She's probably just figured out she can't get into the apartment. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. And again. She's persistent, Morales observed. She's desperate. There's a difference. Officer Tessa Lynn knocked on the door and stuck her head in. Detective, we ran the charity information through our database. Save the Arts Foundation filed incorporation papers last week, but they have already got a fundraising event scheduled for tomorrow night. $50 a plate dinner, cash bar, silent auction. They're expecting about 200 people. Based on what? They've been a charity for exactly 7 days. According to their website, they're an established nonprofit dedicated to supporting emerging artists in the Boston area. Lots of fancy language about community outreach and cultural preservation. I laughed. Miles couldn't preserve a sandwich, let alone culture. The guy's been failing at business ventures since art school. What kind of failures? Morales asked. Coffee shop that lasted 3 months. Freelance graphic design business that folded when he got caught stealing client ideas. Oh, and there was the food truck that got shut down for health code violations. I ticked them off on my fingers. Lana used to make fun of his entrepreneurial spirit. Guess she found it more attractive the second time around. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. Caleb, please call me back. There's been a misunderstanding. The locks aren't working. Did you change them? We need to talk. This is ridiculous. I can explain everything. Call me now. You have to help me. The police were just at my studio asking questions. I showed the messages to Morales. Looks like word travels fast. We sent a team to ask some preliminary questions about the charity. Nothing official, just fishing. He grinned. Guess they caught something. Officer Lynn cleared her throat. There's more. We checked the gallery where they're holding the fundraiser tomorrow night. The owner, Rick Castellano, had no idea it was supposed to be a charity event. He thought he was renting the space for a private art show. So they lied to him too? Looks like it. He's pretty upset. Apparently charity events require different permits and insurance coverage. If they'd gone through with it, he could have lost his license. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Lana. It was Reggie, my partner at the station. Caleb, you need to get down here right now. Your wife is in the parking lot screaming at anyone who'll listen that you've destroyed her life and ruined everything. She's making quite a scene. I looked at Morales. Mind if I handle this? Be my guest. Just try not to make it worse. Worse for who? I found Lana exactly where Reggie said she'd be, in the middle of the station parking lot, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She was still wearing the black dress from the night before, but now it was wrinkled and her makeup was smeared. She looked like she'd been crying, which would have been more effective if I hadn't known she could produce tears on command. Caleb, she rushed toward me the moment she spotted me. Thank God. You have to fix this. The police came to my studio and started asking all these questions about Miles and the charity, and you realized you're in trouble. We're in trouble. We're married, remember? Whatever happens to me affects you too. I almost laughed. Not anymore. Divorce papers were filed this morning. By Monday, whatever happens to you will be your problem alone. Her face went white. You can't be serious. Absolutely serious, like a heart attack. But the charity, it's legitimate. Miles has all the paperwork. Miles has incorporation papers he filed last week and a fake website. What he doesn't have is any actual charitable work, proper permits, or the legal right to solicit donations. I kept my voice level, professional. What he has is a fraud case waiting to happen. You don't understand. This could be big for both of us. The art community in Boston is tight-knit, and if we can establish ourselves as patrons, I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the growing crowd of my coworkers couldn't hear. There is no we, Lana. There's you, there's your boyfriend, and there's the mess you've made. I'm just the guy whose money you tried to steal. I wasn't stealing. It was an investment in our future. Our future ended when you started sleeping with Miles. Everything after that was just you digging the grave deeper. She grabbed my arm. Please, Caleb, I made a mistake, but this doesn't have to ruin everything. We can work through this. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. The one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. The one who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, for better or worse. Then I remembered the messages I'd read, the casual cruelty, the way she'd dismissed our entire marriage as boring and lifeless. No, I said, gently removing her hand. We can't. I turned and walked back toward the station, leaving her standing in the parking lot. Behind me, I could hear her starting to cry. Real tears this time, not the manufactured ones she'd tried to use as weapons. Reggie was waiting by the door, shaking his head. Damn, partner, that was cold. That was necessary. What happens now? Now? Now we let the system do what it does best. I looked back at Lana, who was fumbling with her phone, probably calling Miles. Some people you can save, others you just have to let them crash. The Save the Arts Foundation fundraiser was scheduled for 7 p.m. on Friday night at the Castellano Gallery in the North End. By 6:30, I was sitting in Reggie's car across the street, watching well-dressed people file into what they thought was a legitimate charity event. You sure about this? Reggie asked, adjusting his rearview mirror to get a better view of the gallery entrance. Seems kind of like too much. Trust me, this is just getting started. Detective Morales had called that morning to let me know they'd be making their move tonight. The plan was simple. Let Miles and Lana get started with their presentation, collect some evidence of active fraud, then shut it down in front of everyone. Maximum embarrassment, maximum impact. "There's Miles," I said, pointing to a tall figure in an expensive-looking suit. "Right on time." Miles Trent looked exactly like what he was, a failed entrepreneur trying to dress like a success. The suit was too tight, his hair was too perfect, and he had that desperate energy of someone who knew he was running out of chances. Lana appeared beside him a moment later, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She looked nervous, checking her phone constantly and scanning the crowd like she was expecting trouble. She was right to be nervous. "How many people you think are in there?" Reggie asked. "Morales said they sold about 150 tickets at $50 each, plus whatever they make on the bar and the silent auction. So they're looking at what, 10 grand for the night? If they were legitimate, yeah, but since they're not, they're looking at fraud charges and about 150 very angry donors." At exactly 7:15, Detective Morales and Officer Lynn walked through the gallery's front door, followed by 2 uniformed officers. They moved casually, like guests arriving fashionably late, but I could see the tension in their postures. "Show time," I said. We couldn't hear what was happening inside, but we could see the crowd through the gallery's large front windows. For the first few minutes, everything looked normal. People mingling, drinks flowing, Miles and Lana working the room like the professional grifters they'd become. Then the mood shifted. I watched Morales approach Miles during what looked like the beginning of his presentation. The detective showed his badge, and Miles's face went from confident to terrified in about 3 seconds. Lana, standing nearby, immediately started backing toward the rear of the gallery. "She's going to run," Reggie observed. "Let her try." The crowd was getting agitated now. People were pulling out their phones, some heading for the exits, others pressing closer to see what was happening. Rick Castellano, the gallery owner, was gesturing wildly at Miles, probably demanding to know what the hell was going on. Then Lana made her move. She slipped away from the main crowd and headed for what I assumed was the back exit. But instead of disappearing into the alley, she came around the side of the building and started walking quickly down the street, right toward where Reggie and I were parked. "She's coming this way," Reggie said. "I see her." I got out of the car and started walking toward her, timing it so we'd meet at the corner. She was so focused on her phone, probably trying to call Miles, that she didn't see me until it was too late. "Going somewhere?" I asked. She spun around, nearly dropping her phone. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" "Watching the show. How'd it go in there?" "This is all a misunderstanding. The police don't understand what we were trying to do." "What you were trying to do was steal money from people who thought they were supporting local artists? That's not a misunderstanding, Lana. That's fraud." She looked back toward the gallery, where people were now streaming out the front door. Some looked angry, others confused, but all of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Miles had everything planned out," she said, more to herself than to me. "He said it was foolproof. Miles is an idiot, always has been. The only thing that's changed is that now you're an idiot too." Her phone rang. She answered it immediately, turning away from me. "Miles, where are you? What do you mean they took your computer?" "No, I'm not at the gallery. I'm handling things." She hung up and turned back to me, desperation replacing the anger in her eyes. "Caleb, please. I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be, but this doesn't have to destroy everything. We can still fix this." "Fix what? Your marriage? Your reputation? Your criminal record?" "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being realistic. You committed fraud, Lana. You took money under false pretenses, you lied to donors, and you tried to use my savings to legitimize your scam. Those are crimes, not mistakes." Behind her, I could see Miles being led out of the gallery in handcuffs. The sight should have given me more satisfaction than it did, but mostly I just felt tired. "They arrested him," I said, nodding toward the gallery. She turned to look, and I watched her face crumble. Not the fake tears she'd tried to use on me before, but genuine devastation. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "This is your fault," she said, turning back to me. "If you'd just given us the money like I asked, none of this would have happened. You're right. If I'd given you $5,000 to commit fraud with, you'd be committing fraud with $5,000 more dollars. The only difference is I'd be an accessory instead of a victim." "We weren't going to keep the money. We were going to use it to help artists." "Which artists? Name one." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You can't, because there weren't any. This whole thing was just Miles's latest get-rich-quick scheme, and you fell for it because you wanted to believe you were special, that you were different from all the other people he's scammed over the years." "I am different." "No, Lana, you're not. You're just another Mark who thought she was a partner." A police car pulled up to the curb beside us. Officer Lynn got out and walked over. Mrs. Norton, I'm going to need you to come with me. We have some questions about the Save the Arts Foundation. Lana looked at me one last time, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Caleb, good luck, I said. You're going to need it. As they drove away, Reggie walked up beside me. Feel better? Not yet, I said, watching the police car disappear around the corner. But we're getting there. The next morning, the story was front-page news in the Boston Herald. Charity scam busted at North End Gallery. The article included photos of Miles being arrested and a detailed breakdown of how the fake charity had been exposed. What it didn't include was any mention of Lana cooperating with authorities or expressing remorse. According to the reporter who'd covered the story, she'd spent the entire night in lockup, refusing to answer questions and demanding to call her lawyer. The lawyer she couldn't afford since I'd frozen all our joint accounts. My phone rang around noon. Unknown number. Caleb, it's Cass. We need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, we do. Lana's in jail and this whole thing has gotten completely out of hand. You need to help her. I need to help her? Where were you when she was planning to steal my money and run off with her ex-boyfriend? I didn't know about the money thing. I just knew she was unhappy. So you encouraged her to have an affair? I encouraged her to live her life. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. There was a long pause. When Cass spoke again, her voice was smaller, less confident. Look, I know you're angry, and maybe you have a right to be, but Lana's my best friend, and she's in real trouble. The police are saying she could face serious charges. Good. Caleb. She made her choice, Cass. She chose Miles over me. She chose crime over honesty, and she chose to treat our marriage like a joke. Now she gets to live with the consequences. But if you just talk to the police, explain that she was manipulated, by who? Miles, the guy she's been sleeping with for 3 months? The guy she called exciting and alive compared to her boring husband? Another pause. She said that? She said a lot of things, most of them about how much better her life was going to be once she got rid of me. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, because you only heard her side of the story, and her side was bullshit. I hung up and turned off my phone. I had the weekend off, the apartment to myself, and for the first time in months, no one demanding anything from me. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like the quiet that comes after a patient flatlines, peaceful, but only because the fighting was finally over. Miles made bail on Monday morning. I knew this because he called me at 6 a.m., apparently thinking that waking me up before my shift was a good strategy for winning my sympathy. Caleb, we need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, we do. This whole situation has gotten out of control, and I think if we just sit down man to man... Man to man? I was fully awake now. You want to have a man-to-man conversation about how you've been screwing my wife and trying to steal my money? It's not like that. Lana and I have a connection that goes back years. What we have is real, and the charity thing was legitimate. We were trying to build something meaningful. You were trying to build something, all right. A criminal case. Look, I know you're upset, but taking it out on Lana isn't going to solve anything. She's a good person who got caught up in something she didn't fully understand. I sat up in bed, suddenly very interested in this conversation. She didn't understand that taking money under false pretenses is fraud? She didn't understand the legal complexities. That's my fault, not hers. I should have been more careful with the paperwork. More careful with the paperwork? Miles, you filed incorporation papers for a fake charity and started collecting donations the same week. There's no amount of careful that makes that legal. We were going to help people, real artists who need support. Name one. Silence. You can't, can you? Because there never were any artists. There was just you and Lana and a plan to steal money from people who actually wanted to help. You don't understand the art world, Caleb. It's not as simple as, I understand theft. I understand fraud. And I understand that you're calling me because you want something. I want you to drop the charges against Lana. I can't drop charges I didn't file. The police arrested both of you based on evidence of criminal activity. What happens next is up to the district attorney. But if you talk to them, explain that she was just following my lead, she was following her own greed, Miles, just like you. That's not true. Really? Then why did she ask me for $5,000? What was that money for? Another silence. She told you about that? She texted me about it, right before I called the police. Caleb, that money was just seed funding, to make the charity look legitimate. We were going to pay it back with interest. From what? The donations you were planning to steal? We weren't going to steal anything. We were going to take a reasonable administrative fee and use the rest for grants. How much of a fee? That's not the point. How much, Miles? 60%, but that's standard for startup nonprofits. I laughed. Actually laughed. 60%? You were going to keep 60% of donations that people thought were going to help struggling artists. Administrative costs are expensive. Office space, equipment, staff salaries. What staff? What office? You were running this thing out of Lana's studio, which I pay for, using equipment I bought her. We had plans to expand. You had plans to steal. There's a difference. I could hear him getting frustrated now, his voice rising. You know what your problem is, Caleb? You have no vision. No understanding of what it takes to build something meaningful. You're content to just show up to work every day and collect your paycheck, but some of us want more. Some of you want more of other people's money. I want to make a difference in the world. I want to support art and culture, and you want to get rich without working for it, just like every other scam you've tried over the years. This isn't a scam. The coffee shop that folded after 3 months wasn't a scam either, right? Neither was the graphic design business where you stole client ideas, or the food truck that got shut down for health violations. How do you know about those? Lana used to tell me stories about your entrepreneurial adventures. She thought they were hilarious. Guess she found them more attractive the second time around. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Miles spoke again, his voice was different, colder. You think you've won something here, don't you? I think I've avoided losing everything to a couple of thieves. Lana never loved you, you know. She told me all about your marriage, how boring you are, how boring your private life is, how she felt like she was suffocating living with someone so small and predictable. That should have hurt. A few days ago it would have, but now it just sounded like desperation. If that's true, then why did she stay married to me for 5 years? Financial security. She needed someone to pay the bills while she built her career. Her career? Miles, she sold exactly 3 photographs in the past 2 years, for a total of $400. I've been paying for everything, rent, food, her studio, her equipment, while she played artist. She's talented. She's lazy, and apparently she's also a criminal. Don't talk about her like that. I'll talk about her however I want. She's my wife. Or was, until she decided to throw away our marriage for a chance to commit fraud with her loser ex-boyfriend. You bastard. Miles? What? Don't call me again. I hung up and immediately called Detective Morales. They're planning something, I told him. Miles just called trying to get me to drop charges against Lana, and when that didn't work, he got nasty. These two aren't done causing trouble. What kind of trouble? I don't know yet. But Miles has been running scams for years, and now he's got nothing to lose. That makes him dangerous. We'll keep an eye on both of them. Lana's still in custody, but Miles made bail yesterday. I know. He called me this morning. He shouldn't be contacting you at all. That could be considered witness intimidation. Can you arrest him for it? Not unless he threatens you directly, but we can have a conversation with him about appropriate behavior while he's awaiting trial. Do that. I hung up and got ready for work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Miles had sounded desperate on the phone, and desperate people do stupid things. I was right. That evening, I came home to find my apartment door standing open. Not broken, not forced, just open, like someone had walked right in. I called the police before going inside, then waited in the hallway until they arrived. Officer Lynn was first on the scene, followed by Detective Morales. Anything missing? Morales asked as we walked through the apartment. Not that I can tell, but someone was definitely here. The place had been searched, but carefully. Drawers opened and closed, papers shuffled through, but nothing obviously disturbed. It was the kind of search someone does when they are looking for something specific. What would they be looking for? Lynn asked. I don't know. Maybe evidence that could hurt their case? Like what? I thought about it. Bank records, maybe, or proof of how much money they were planning to steal. We found the answer in my bedroom. My laptop was still there, but it had been turned on. The browser history showed someone had accessed my email account and my online banking. They were looking for ammunition, Morales said. Something they could use to make you look bad if this goes to trial. Did they find anything? Did they? I thought about my finances, my email history, my online activity. I lived a pretty boring life. Work, home, the occasional dinner out with Reggie. No gambling, no affairs, no secret vices that could be used against me. No, there's nothing to find. Then they wasted their time. Maybe. Or maybe they were looking for something else. Like what? A way to get back at me. I was right about that, too. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed from bumper to bumper. Deep scratches that went all the way down to the metal, spelling out asshole across the driver's side door. The morning after that, someone had called my supervisor at work to report that I'd been stealing drugs from the ambulance. It was bullshit, of course, and easily disproven, but it still meant an investigation and a lot of uncomfortable questions. By Thursday, I'd had enough. I called Morales. They're escalating. First the break-in, then the car. Now they're trying to get me fired. This has to stop. We can't prove it was them. Who else would it be? That's not how the law works, Caleb. We need evidence. Then let's get some. What do you have in mind? They want to play games? Fine, let's play. That night, I set up a camera in my apartment window with a clear view of the parking lot and my car. Then I waited. At 2 a.m., a figure in dark clothing appeared near my car. Male, tall, moving carefully, but not carefully enough to avoid the camera. He had something in his hand. Looked like a screwdriver or a knife. I called 911, then went downstairs to confront him. Having fun, Miles? He spun around, nearly dropping whatever he was holding. In the light from the parking lot, I could see his face clearly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Caleb, you didn't expect to get caught. Again. You were just vandalizing my car. Again, while you're out on bail for fraud charges. He looked around nervously, probably realizing how bad this looked. Look, we can work this out, man to man. No, we can't. Yes, we can. I know you're angry about Lana, but she never meant for things to go this far. She loves you, Caleb. She made a mistake, but... She loves me? Is that why she's been sleeping with you for 3 months? That was just physical. What you two have is deeper. What we had. Past tense. Police sirens were getting closer. Miles heard them too. You called the cops? I called the cops. Caleb, please, if they arrest me again, I'll lose my bail. I'll go back to jail. Good. You don't understand. I can't go back there. Those people, they're animals. Then you shouldn't have committed crimes. The police cars pulled into the parking lot, and Miles's face went white. He looked at me with something that might have been hatred, or might have been fear. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, I replied as the officers approached. It is. They arrested Miles for vandalism, violation of bail conditions, and witness intimidation. This time, there would be no bail. As they drove him away, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, exactly, but the kind of calm that comes when you finally stop a patient from bleeding out. The crisis was over. Now came the recovery. Lana made bail 3 days after Miles was rearrested. I knew because she showed up at the fire station during my shift, demanding to see me. Tell her I'm busy, I told Reggie, who'd answered the call from the front desk. She says she'll wait. Tell her to wait somewhere else. She says she's not leaving until she talks to you. I looked out the window and saw her pacing in the parking lot, still wearing that red dress from the charity event. It was wrinkled now, and she looked like she'd been sleeping in it. How long has she been out there? About an hour. Fine, I'll talk to her, but not alone. Reggie came with me, along with Captain Rodriguez, who'd insisted on being present after hearing about the harassment and vandalism. Lana looked worse up close. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and she had that desperate look of someone who'd run out of options. Caleb, thank God. We need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, we do. This whole situation has gotten completely out of control, and I need your help. My help? The lawyers are saying I could face serious jail time. Years, Caleb, for something that was supposed to be legitimate. It wasn't legitimate. It was fraud. It was Miles's idea. I just went along with it because I trusted him. You went along with it because you thought you'd get rich. She looked around at the three of us, then focused back on me. Can we please talk privately? No. Caleb, please, I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife. There's a difference. The divorce isn't final yet. We're still married, which means nothing. You gave up any claim to my loyalty when you started sleeping with Miles. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, you need to leave. This is a place of business, and you're disrupting operations. I'm not disrupting anything. I'm trying to talk to my husband. Your husband is at work. If you want to talk to him, call him during his off hours. I've tried calling. He won't answer. Then maybe he doesn't want to talk to you, Reggie said. She turned on him. This is none of your business. Actually, it is. Caleb's my partner, which means your problems become my problems when they show up at our workplace. What problems? I haven't done anything to you people. You committed fraud, Captain Rodriguez said. You tried to steal money from your husband. You've been harassing him, vandalizing his property, and now you're disrupting his workplace. That's enough problems for 1 week. I never vandalized anything. That was Miles. Miles, who you were working with. Miles, who you were sleeping with. Miles, who you helped plan a charity scam. It wasn't a scam. Then what was it? I asked. It was a business venture that didn't work out. A business venture where you planned to keep 60% of donations that people thought were going to help struggling artists. We had expenses. What expenses? You were running it out of the studio I pay for, using equipment I bought you with money you tried to steal from me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. That's what I thought. My radio crackled. Emergency call. Cardiac arrest on Beacon Street. I have to go, I said, heading for the ambulance. Caleb, wait. No, we're not done talking. Yes, we are. As Reggie and I drove away, I could see her in the side mirror, standing in the parking lot looking lost and desperate. You feel bad for her? Reggie asked. I feel bad for the person she used to be. The person she is now made her own choices. The cardiac arrest call turned out to be a false alarm. Elderly man who'd fainted from dehydration, not a heart attack. But by the time we got back to the station, Lana was gone. She wasn't gone for long. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, all from numbers I didn't recognize. The first text message explained why. Saw the news story about your wife. Sorry for what you're going through. News story? I turned on the local morning show and found myself looking at a live report from outside the courthouse. The reporter, a young woman named Ellie Santos, was standing next to a familiar figure in a black dress. Joining us now is Lana Pierce, who was recently arrested in connection with an alleged charity fraud scheme. Mrs. Pierce, you've asked to tell your side of the story. That's right, Ellie. The media has painted a very unfair picture of what happened, and I want people to know the truth. I turned up the volume. The truth is that I was manipulated by my ex-boyfriend into participating in what I thought was a legitimate charity. When I realized what was really happening, I tried to get out, but it was too late. What about your husband's role in all this? My husband, Caleb Norton, has been emotionally abusive for years. He controls all our finances, isolates me from my friends, and when I finally found the courage to leave him, he used his connections with the police to have me arrested. I stared at the screen in disbelief. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence of this abuse? Emotional abuse doesn't leave physical marks, Ellie. It's about control, manipulation, making someone feel worthless. Caleb is very good at that. But the police reports indicate that you and Miles Trent were planning to defraud donors. Miles told me we were starting a legitimate charity. I trusted him because I was desperate to escape my marriage. When Caleb found out, he called the police not because of any charity fraud, but because he couldn't stand the thought of me being happy with someone else. My phone rang. Captain Rodriguez. Caleb, you need to get down here, now. I'm watching the news. It gets worse. She's filed a restraining order against you, claiming domestic abuse, and there are reporters in our parking lot. I got dressed and drove to the station, taking back streets to avoid the news vans I could see gathering around the courthouse, but there were already 2 reporters waiting when I pulled into the station parking lot. Mr. Norton, can you comment on your wife's allegations of domestic abuse? Mr. Norton, is it true that you had her arrested out of jealousy? I ignored them and went inside, where Captain Rodriguez was waiting with a grim expression. How bad is it? I asked. Bad. The restraining order hearing is this afternoon, and if she convinces a judge that you're abusive, it could affect the criminal case against her. She's trying to make herself look like the victim. That's exactly what she's doing, and it might work. What do I do? You get a lawyer, a good one, and you get ready to fight. The lawyer, Patricia Webb, was everything Captain Rodriguez had promised. Smart, tough, and expensive. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. She's playing the domestic abuse card, she said when I finished. It's a common defense strategy in fraud cases involving married couples. Make the wife look like a victim of her controlling husband. But it's not true. Truth is irrelevant if she can make it sound believable. Do you have any evidence of your wife's actual behavior? Text messages, emails, recordings? I have the messages between her and Miles about the charity fraud, and the messages between her and her friend Cass where she talks about how boring our marriage was. That helps, but it's not enough. We need to show a pattern of deception and manipulation on her part, not yours. What about the affair? Doesn't that prove she's lying? It proves she was unfaithful, but unfaithful wives can still be abuse victims. We need more. Like what? Like evidence that she's done this before. Other lies, other scams, other times she's manipulated people to get what she wants. I thought about it. There might be something. Her friend Cass mentioned that Lana had been stuck in routine and needed excitement, but the way she said it, it sounded like this wasn't the first time. Can you get Cass to talk? Maybe, if I approach it right. Do it. And Caleb? Yeah? Be careful. Your wife is playing for keeps now, and desperate people do desperate things. She was right about that. That evening, I came home to find my apartment had been broken into again. But this time, things were missing. My laptop, my backup hard drives, the printed bank statements I'd been keeping in my desk drawer, anything that might contain evidence of my financial situation or communication history. But they'd missed something. The cloud backup of Lana's messages was still accessible through my phone, and I'd been smart enough to forward the most damaging ones to my personal email account, which was protected by two-factor authentication. I called Detective Morales. They're getting desperate, I told him. First the TV interview, now another break-in. They're trying to destroy evidence and control the narrative. We can't prove it was them. Miles is in jail. It had to be Lana. Maybe, but she's got an alibi. She was at her lawyer's office all afternoon. Then she had help. Probably, but we can't prove that either. So what do? You be smarter than they are. That night, I set up cameras throughout my apartment and changed all my passwords. Then I did something that felt like the old Caleb, the one who used to save lives instead of just trying to survive them. I went on the offensive. I called Ellie Santos, the reporter who'd interviewed Lana. Ms. Wauman Santos? This is Caleb Norton. I saw your interview with my wife this morning, and I think you should know that she lied to you. Mr. Norton, I can't discuss... She lied about the domestic abuse. She lied about being manipulated, and I can prove it. There was a pause. What kind of proof? Text messages, bank records, police reports. Everything you need to show that she's been planning this fraud for months and that her abuse allegations are just a desperate attempt to avoid responsibility. I'm listening. But I want something in return. What? I want you to do a real investigation. Not just a puff piece where she gets to play victim, but actual journalism. Look into her background, her relationship with Miles, the charity fraud. Get the whole story. And if I do that, you'll give me exclusive access to your evidence. All of it. Deal. 2 days later, Ellie Santos ran a follow-up story that destroyed Lana's victim narrative. The piece included screenshots of Lana's messages about the charity scam, her cruel comments about our marriage, and her plans to disappear completely once she had enough money. But the real bombshell was what Ellie had discovered about Lana's past. Turns out, this wasn't her first time playing the victim card. In college, she'd accused a professor of harassment after he'd given her a failing grade, accusations that were later proven false. After art school, she'd sued a former employer for discrimination, settling out of court when evidence emerged that she'd been stealing from the company. Lana Pierce has a pattern, Ellie reported, of making false accusations when she doesn't get what she wants. The question now is whether a judge will see through her latest performance. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the next morning. I went to bed that night feeling like I finally had a fighting chance. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about one. This was far from over. The restraining order hearing was held in a windowless courtroom that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Judge Patricia Hawkins looked like she'd heard every sob story in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Lana sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. She'd traded the wrinkled red dress for a conservative blue outfit that was probably meant to make her look sympathetic. It might have worked if I hadn't known what she was really like. Your Honor, her lawyer began, my client has been the victim of systematic emotional abuse and financial control by her husband. When she finally found the courage to leave this toxic relationship, he used his connections with law enforcement to have her falsely arrested. Judge Hawkins looked skeptical. Mr. Brennan, I've read the police reports. Your client was arrested for charity fraud, not for leaving her husband. The fraud charges are retaliation, Your Honor. A way for Mr. Norton to punish my client for seeking happiness elsewhere. With her ex-boyfriend? My client's personal relationships are not relevant to the question of domestic abuse. Actually, they are. Miss Webb? My lawyer stood up. Your Honor, we have extensive evidence that Mrs. Norton's abuse allegations are false and that she has a pattern of making such accusations when she doesn't get what she wants. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Hawkins flipped through the documents, her expression growing more skeptical with each page. These are text messages between your client and her boyfriend discussing charity fraud, she said to Lana's lawyer, and between your client and her friend, where she describes her husband as boring and talks about plans to disappear completely with stolen money. Those messages were taken out of context. What context makes charity fraud acceptable, Mr. Brennan? Your Honor, my client was manipulated. By whom? According to these messages, she was an active participant in planning the fraud. In fact, she seems to have been the one who suggested using her husband's money to legitimize the scheme. Lana whispered something to her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. Your Honor, my client would like to address the court directly. Go ahead. Lana stood up, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, sincere, genuinely remorseful. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I know that. But I was desperate to escape a marriage that was slowly ruining me. Caleb is very good at emotional manipulation. He makes you feel like you're crazy, like you're the problem, like you deserve whatever happens to you. She was good. If I hadn't read her messages, if I hadn't seen her planning to steal my money and run away with Miles, I might have believed her myself. He controls all the money, all the decisions. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. When Miles offered me a chance to be part of something meaningful, something that could give me financial independence, I grabbed it. Maybe I didn't ask enough questions. Maybe I should have been more careful. But I was desperate. Judge Hawkins listened without expression. When Lana finished, she turned to me. Mr. Norton, do you have anything to say? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor, my wife is lying. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. She's not a victim of domestic abuse. She's a con artist who got caught and is now trying to blame everyone else for her choices. Can you prove that? Yes, I can. My lawyer handed me a tablet with the screenshots I'd prepared. These are messages between my wife and her boyfriend, planning their charity fraud in detail. This one is from 3 weeks ago, where she says, and I quote, Caleb's such an idiot. Mr. Emergency Exit thinks he's saving the world one junkie at a time. This'll be easier than stealing candy from a corpse. Judge Hawkins raised an eyebrow. She called you Mr. Emergency Exit? Because I'm a paramedic. She was mocking my profession while planning to steal my money. Continue. This message is from 2 weeks ago. Does he suspect anything? Her friend asks. My wife responds, no, he's too busy playing hero to notice his wife is getting actual excitement for once. Miles makes me feel like a woman instead of a roommate. Plus, when this charity thing pays off, I'll have enough money to disappear completely. The courtroom was completely quiet. Even Lana's lawyer had stopped looking at his phone. Your Honor, these messages show clear premeditation. She wasn't manipulated or coerced. She was an active participant in planning to defraud charitable donors and steal my money. The only thing she's a victim of is her own greed. Judge Hawkins looked at Lana. Mrs. Norton, do you dispute the authenticity of these messages? Lana's composure finally cracked. I was angry. People say things when they're angry. You said you were going to disappear with stolen money. That's not anger. That's criminal intent. I didn't mean it literally. What did you mean? I don't know. I was confused. Judge Hawkins closed the folder and looked at both lawyers. I've heard enough. The restraining order is denied. Furthermore, I'm forwarding these materials to the district attorney's office as evidence of perjury and filing a false police report. Lana's face went white. Your Honor, you're excused, Mrs. Norton, and I suggest you focus on your criminal defense rather than filing frivolous restraining orders. As we left the courthouse, Lana tried to approach me one more time. Caleb, please, can't we just talk about this like adults? We're done talking. But the divorce? We haven't settled anything about property division or... There's nothing to divide. The apartment lease is in my name, the car loan is in my name, and all the money in our accounts came from my job. You contributed exactly nothing to our marriage except lies and betrayal. That's not true. I supported you emotionally. You mocked my profession, called me boring, and planned to steal my money. That's not support, Lana. That's parasitism. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Mrs. Norton, we should go. No, we should not go. This is my life we're talking about. Your life? I laughed. Your life is about to consist of criminal trials and prison sentences. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to become a con artist. I'm not a con artist. You filed incorporation papers for a fake charity, collected donations under false pretenses, and planned to keep 60% of the money for administrative costs. What would you call that? A mistake. A mistake is adding wrong or forgetting to pay a bill. What you did was commit fraud. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. The realization that she'd lost, completely and irrevocably. You've destroyed my life, she said quietly. No, Lana. You destroyed your own life. I just refuse to let you destroy mine, too. As I walked away, I heard her start to cry. Real tears this time, not the manufactured ones she'd used to try to manipulate judges and reporters. The sound should have made me feel something. Guilt, regret, maybe even pity. Instead, it sounded like the flat tone of a heart monitor after a patient has finally stopped fighting. Peaceful in its way. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. Miles pled guilty to fraud charges and was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. Lana maintained her innocence right up until the jury came back with a guilty verdict on all counts. She got 18 months, plus restitution to all the donors they'd defrauded. The judge also ordered her to pay a fine equal to the amount they'd planned to steal, which, ironically, was almost exactly the $5,000 she'd demanded from me in that final text message. The divorce was finalized while she was in prison. She didn't contest it. I kept the apartment, the car, and what was left of my savings after paying legal fees. More importantly, I kept my job, my reputation, and my self-respect. 6 months after the trial ended, I ran into Cass at a grocery store in Cambridge. She looked embarrassed to see me, which was appropriate since she'd been named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the charity fraud. "Caleb," she said, clearly wishing she could disappear. "How are you?" "Better than I've been in years. You?" "I'm managing. Look, I want you to know that I never knew about the money thing. I knew Lana was unhappy, and I knew she was seeing Miles, but I had no idea they were planning to steal from you. But you encouraged the affair." "I encouraged her to be happy. I thought she deserved better than—" She stopped herself. "Better than what? A boring husband who worked double shifts to pay for her art supplies and studio rent? I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. Yes, you were, but you weren't wrong about Lana. She did deserve better. She deserved a husband who wouldn't call the police when she tried to steal his money and run away with her ex-boyfriend. Unfortunately for her, that's not the husband she got." Cass looked like she wanted to say something else, but I was already walking away. Some conversations aren't worth having, even when you win them. These days, I work my shifts, come home to my quiet apartment, and sleep better than I have in years. Reggie says I seem lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. He's right. For 5 years, I carried the weight of a fading marriage, trying to resuscitate something that was already gone. It took me too long to realize that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop fighting and let nature take its course. Lana gets out of prison in 8 months. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that she's planning to move to California when she's released, to start fresh somewhere. Nobody knows her story. Good luck with that. The internet is forever, and her mugshot is the first thing that comes up when you Google her name. Miles got out last month and immediately violated his parole by trying to start another fake charity, this one supposedly helping veterans. He's back in prison now, probably for longer this time. As for me, I'm exactly where I've always been, saving the people who can be saved and letting go of the ones who can't. It's not a perfect system, but it works, and sometimes that's enough.